Welcome to Photoshop, and this is going to be a full-length, really long tutorial on retouching. So one of the things I find out when I'm retouching is actually what my subject or my client wants. There's no sense spending tons of time if they want some simple retouching. However, you'll find out a lot of the times people want major retouching. So we're going to go over all the steps involved in retouching, and the first thing that we need to do is go ahead and take this image, and we are in Adobe Camera Raw. So notice we're in Adobe 1998 is our color space and 16-bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually change my color profile and make it portrait mode. That is going to open the image up and desaturate a little bit. Our white balance of our image is off. It's a little bit red for my liking, so I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to dial a little bit more of that red out. I don't want to do too much because I don't want to make it too blue. That's going to cause some other issues. So one of the issues I see right here is just too red. So we're going to go in here and do what's called a color shift, and we're going to shift the color to a different color because it's not the color that I want. So what I'm going to do for reds, if I go this way, it's going to make it more yellow. So that's what I want. I want to shift it from red towards the warmer yellow side. I'm going to do that with both of these colors because both orange and red are kind of the problem colors that we have in this image. So that looks pretty good. So next thing I'm going to do is we're going to go to hue saturation. So another issue is the colors in the skin tone is just a little bit too vibrant. So what we're going to do in this colors that we just adjusted, we're going to desaturate those just a hair. So another option you have is to brighten those areas. So brightening those areas a lot of times can help in your luminance. So you're just making that color a little bit brighter. So that's a little bit more neutral of a color. Is it perfect? No, but this is something that we can go into later and fix when we do our color adjustments. So I'm going to go ahead and go back here. I'm going to open up my shadows just a bit, and I'm going to say open image. Alright, so this is our default image. We have the layer down here. So the first thing that we're going to do in retouching an image, and this is optional. Sometimes these steps can be done in your frequency separation, but I'm going to do these minor adjustments right now, and then I'm going to use that layer to create the frequency separation. So I will show you what that means. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and hold Command J to duplicate my layer. So I've duplicated my background layer because this layer I don't want to work off of. This is the layer I want to work on. And so I'm going to zoom in here to the face, and I am going to grab my healing brush. Now the difference between the spot healing brush and the healing brush. The spot healing brush you just kind of paint on. It uses content aware to fill in that area. The healing brush is basically exactly the same, except for one major issue. You are sampling a pattern and then painting that in. And in this case, the pattern or the texture below. So for instance, right here we have this little kind of darker spot. If I take a target and read that below and then I paint over that, I can say I want that texture here. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to do this to all the major issues or places within the photo because I want to be able to show you as well how to do it in frequency separation. But we're just going to go through, and a lot of the minor stuff that I don't really care about, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of clean this face up and show you how to use this brush. So we'll save and wait and get some of these hairs later, but I'm just going to be going over this face. I'm going to zoom out a little bit just so I can get to places that I want to be. So we'll go up here into the forehead and zoom back in. And so anything that I just kind of want to clean up, I'm going to use this brush. So moles on people's faces are definitely one of those areas where when you're retouching, you definitely want to ask them if they want them removed or not removed, because sometimes the areas. So this is a great image. So one of the problems that you run into when using the healing brush and the spot healing brush is that the way it works is you target an area and then it reads the area reads the areas around it and the colors and fills it in. So this area, it got a little bit too dark, and that's because I'm so close to the eyebrow. So I'm going to Command Z that and go back to the original spot. So there's a couple different ways to do it. So this area, I'm just going to go ahead and save that, and we will do that in frequency separation because we'll be able to control that color a whole lot better at that point. So this is one area in which this healing brush is great because it not only when you clone it, it keeps the color, but the texture as well. So where we have some little texture up here, this brush is really going to help us in being more accurate. And so obviously this type of process can take a long time because you can really go in here and really look and really sort of clean this face up. So you'll notice that I'm constantly adjusting the size of my brush. I don't want my brush to be too small or too big a lot of times. I'm just kind of going through and adjusting it to the size of the area that I want to fix. So we have this, we'll work on the lips, but then we have this just weird dot here, so we're just going to go ahead and fix that. So we come over here, we also have just some little specular highlights, some of them. We'll see if we can fix this one. Yeah, it looks good. And so we're going to make this smaller and clean up a lot of this stuff in the face. Looks like we got a little blackhead right there. Now, one of the things, and I'll just use this hair right here for this instance, we're going to go ahead and try to clean this hair up. Usually I'm going to do this in frequency separation because this is more of the high frequency that we're seeing, but I'll just use this with the brush. Now if you do something like this and it leaves a weird mark or picks weird colors, just hit Command Z and undo it. Like right there, it did something weird. So we're not going to do that area right there. I'll just come back. And a lot of times you can go back over the area the opposite way and it will kind of fix it. So it's not perfect, but that looks pretty good. So we've kind of removed that hair. It looks like there's some more of that hair right here or a mark. It's very, very fine hair. So we'll just go ahead and remove that. So you guys can hold on. I'm going to speed up the video here. I'm just going to go through and clone and clean up a lot of these images, and we'll kind of speed up, and then I'll come back to you once I've got most of this area cleaned up how I want it. Alright, that's some good basic cleanup on the face there. There's actually much more that we can do, but we're going to stop there. I'm going to turn this background layer back on, and I will turn this layer off and on, off and on, off and on. So you can see generally what we did. I'll zoom in a little bit to that face again. So we'll just move this, and I will go ahead and hit off, on, off, on. So just minor blemish cleanup at this point. All right. So we're going to zoom out. So now we're going to go into the frequency separation part of this video. So this is the layer that we're going to use for frequency separation. So this is going to be my bottom layer. And I'm going to hit Command J or Control J on a PC and duplicate the layer. I'm going to call the top layer. I'm going to give you both. I'm going to call this detail / high. You're going to hear different people call different things. So this is actually the high layer, and it contains the detail. So below it is the low layer, or the blur, or the color, or the low layer. So there's all these different just terminology as to different people as to what they're going to use. It contains a blur. You usually are doing more color work in this, and it is your low pass layer. So we're going to turn this layer off and select this bottom layer. And this is usually an area where people get confused. A lot of times they'll turn this layer off, but they won't actually select it. So when they do this next step, they're actually doing it on the layer that's off. So make sure you select this layer. That's really important. So we are going to go up and blur this image. So I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. Now this is a very important step, and so you will notice if I ever run an action, mine always stops at this moment because each image is going to be blurred more depending on how it's shot and how you want it to look. So the idea is you want to blur your image, but not so little that you still see detail, and not so much that you can't see anything. So what you're looking for is just kind of an area where you start to remove all the detail, but you can still make out most of the parts of the face. This is going to be different on different resolution images, how tight you shot it. So usually the tighter you shoot an image, more of a headshot, the more you're going to do the radius. The looser an image is, you're going to usually have a smaller radius. So for this one, we're going to go about 8.2. That's generally pretty high for me, but we're going to be good with that. So I'm going to say OK. So now we're going to come back up and turn this on and select it, which is very important. We're going to go up to Image and down to Apply Image. So we're going to make sure that in the layer we want to select the low channel, color, or blur. We want our blending mode to be add, scale of 2, offset of 0, and invert. And you should get this kind of weird grayish look. Now these are the settings for 16-bit image. I'll put the settings for an 8-bit image, which is a little bit different. You're going to actually do subtract, scale of 2, offset of 128, and this should be invert, should be unchecked in this case. So these are the settings for 8-bit. But we're going to use 16-bit since I'm in 16-bit, and we will change everything back and then hit OK. Now we're going to come up to this layer and change our blending mode to linear light, and so that is going to bring back the detail. So what high frequency separation has done, it's separated the image into two parts, the detail and the color part in the bottom. So if I come up here and I turn, and let me drag this down just a little bit and zoom in a little bit so it really fills the screen so you can see. If I turn the detail off, you notice it's gone. All those pores are gone. So one of the things that you see a lot of times in retouching is just an airbrush where the subject has lost all their pores. They're just gone. It's like the world's most perfect skin. Well, this doesn't exist. So what I like to do in this is to add those pores back. So the skin is soft, but it still has that realistic texture that we want to bring back in. So frequency separation puts the detail or the high frequency part in one layer, and then the color on another layer. So we can come in here and adjust color tones, values, marks, and anything that has to do with color or incorrect color, and we can fix that. And then anything that has detail that needs to be fixed, we come in here. And then we can blend those two layers together to get the perfect skin. So what I'm saying here is, like, if she wants a softer skin, I can easily just lower the detail opacity, and as you can see, as I lower that opacity, her skin becomes softer. Now we're going to paint a mask into this so it does not affect the eyes in the end. So right now it's affecting the whole image and it doesn't look good. But as you control the different opacity levels, we're controlling how much of that texture we bring back into the face and wear, which is really, really, really important. All right, so the next step here is we're in this blur color low pass layer, and the object here is to remove any color or imperfections in color that we want. So that could be a mole, it could be hair, or if we just kind of go around here. So right here on the scar, this color within the scar is darker than everything else, so we want to remove that. Now, one of the tricks you have to remember is a lot of times, because we have now separated our detail here and our color here, sometimes just because you remove an area in the image, the color doesn't mean it will be totally gone, because sometimes there will be detail. So you'll have to kind of go back up here and remove the detail as well as the color. So when you do frequency separation, that's something that you're going to need to think about. So there's a couple different ways that people do this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have the lasso here, and I'm going to go ahead and circle that or select feather, and I'm going to change my feather to just, we'll do 3. And your feather selection really depends on how big or small in the resolution of your image, but I just don't want a hard edge when I do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to go up here and circle that color, and then I'm going to go up to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and I'm usually blur this around 9 is good. And so what that's doing is spreading out or dissolving that color so it blends in with the rest of the color. So I'll hit OK, and so we'll just Command Z this. So you can see it's getting rid of it, but not totally, because that's a big area. So in this case, this might not have been the best selection for this. I could come up here and just blur it again. Now, it's not like this is going to be out of focus, because the detail is actually there, so you can still see the details there. It's just we're blending or blurring that color in this image. So I'm going to do a couple steps back so we get this. All right, we'll turn that back off. And so the second method is going to be using the patch tool. So if we come here and we drop down and we get the patch tool, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to select this area, and then I'm just going to move it over to a light color or an area that's very similar, and it's going to patch that color and remove that. And so that did a pretty good job there. So now if I turn this detail layer back on, you can still see the detail of the scar is gone, but the color has disappeared. And so you do this in a whole bunch of different ways when you're doing frequency separation or retouching. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this back off. You could also use the clone stamp here. Now when I use the clone stamp, I usually will drop this down to around 60 to 50%, and I'm going to clone that area with this, because remember, all we're trying to do is blend color. So we can use the lasso, and I will tell you, the lasso is actually good for doing specific items. So hopefully we'll run into one. I see one right here that we can get into. You can use the patch tool. You could really use the healing brush. All you're trying to do is make consistent and even color in this image. So one of the issues that we ran into is right here on this image, this mole is very close to the eyebrow. Whenever you use a content aware tool, it's going to pick up some of the color in the eyebrow and make it too dark. So this is a good one for either using the patch tool, or in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and use this clone stamp tool. So I'm just cloning a light color and I'm getting rid of that. So we're going to do this right here where we clone a light color. So the reason I'm doing 50 or 60% is because I don't want it absolute like 100, and this helps blend it so it's seamless that you can't see what happened. So another area is right here, and I'll switch to the lasso tool. But notice we have this kind of darker kind of line within this skin. And it's not like it's bad, it's just that we want to kind of subdue that or make it less apparent. So this is one where we can come in here, and notice I'm circling outside of this dark area. I want to get some of the other color as well. And this is one where you're going to use that Gaussian blur. So that blur is going to blend that area so it's not as noticeable. So here I can come into this nose and I can Gaussian blur this to make it so it's not as noticeable. So if it's blurring but it's not enough, you can also go up here into filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and we can easily increase that until it sort of blends. That seems to look pretty good. Now, this is important. So if you notice, it's a little hard to see, but right here we can sort of see the line of where I blurred that. We do not want that to happen. So the issue here is my feather is not strong enough. So I'm going to increase that feather to 7. and hopefully that will work. I'll select that, Gaussian blur it, and that seemed to get better. It's not perfect, so I'm going to go back 2 steps. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to change that feather to 10 pixels, and we will try to blur it one last time. And so what's happening, the reason you're seeing that edge is because your Gaussian blur is much larger than your feather, so it's actually blurring over top of the feather of the selection. So there's a couple different things you can do. You can kind of come in here and do some smaller areas and try to blur those. So we're going to go in here and go blur, Gaussian blur, and now I'm going to reduce that back down so it's much smaller, and we're trying to just blend those certain areas. You can also use that patch tool or the clone stamp tool, really whatever you want to do as far as removing different areas. So right here we have this darker area. I'll go ahead and just use that patch tool. So I'll take the patch, I'm going to go right below it so I get sort of that same color. Now sometimes even the patch tool makes marks, like where you do something and you see it. It's usually not so bad here, but if you ever do a content aware tool and it's noticeable, no big deal. Just go ahead and choose something, another spot, or just kind of do it over again. You can also control the color and the structure when you're using content aware, and those are going to be your settings. You need to make sure content aware is selected, and then go ahead and work and try these. So it's right now asking us, do we want to sample all layers, but we just want to sample this layer in this case because that's how we have it set up. So once again, we'll come in here and kind of get this mole and drag this down, and notice it left sort of a little mark there. So I'm going to undo this, make my selection a little bit bigger, and we'll try it again. And that worked better, but not perfect. So what I'm going to do is take this clone stamp tool. I'm going to lower the opacity even more, and I'm going to make a selection, kind of just blend that in so you can't see it. And since I'm here, I'll just use that to kind of clone that area out as well. So here is an area where using the lasso is going to be real helpful. So notice we have this sort of line. If I want to make this less apparent, so the issue here is this shadow over here. So if I was to select this area here, and then I come up to my blur, Gaussian blur, this should help blend that so it's not as strong. So I'll move this up to about 8.5 and hit OK. And now you can see we haven't gotten rid of it, but I'm making it less apparent. I want to get rid of some more of it down here. So once again, we'll just hit Filter, Gaussian blur, and you can see that really makes it less apparent. A lot of times you don't want to totally get rid of something because then it will look like they have just one round bulbous neck, but this is very helpful in blending colors. So right here it looks like we have sort of a vein. I'm going to hit Gaussian blur, and that's going to blend that area. So right here, notice we have some color, so we're just going to blend that area using Gaussian blur. So it's helpful in Photoshop sometimes to know multiple ways to do the same aspect, because one sometimes works much better than the other. So we'll come up here and look and see. Now there's a kind of a harsh transition. We're going to take care of that, but we're going to do something a little bit different for that. So right here under this darker circle, I think I'm going to try the patch tool. So we'll just come in here with this patch tool, take this area, slide it down here, and that worked pretty good. It got rid of it. I'm going to come back in and go ahead and use my clone stamp tool once again, just to kind of blend it and get it how I want it. So right here on this nose, I'm going back to the lasso tool, and there's a little bit of redness in it, and I'm going to go ahead and Gaussian blur that just a little bit to kind of blend it and make it more even. So right here we have this little area, and we're going to Gaussian blur that, make that more even. So you would just kind of go through the rest of this image, and I'll kind of zoom out so we can see, and just keep adjusting. So you can see right here there's a little bit dark of an area that we sort of missed. So I will just try the patch tool just for this one to see how it works. Take that, drop it down, say we want to replace that with that, and then we'll zoom back out, and now we have a much smoother tonal transition through the image here. And so you're just going to go through, and all you're doing is trying to blend areas. You can do any sort of different blend. So right here on this chin, I'm going to go back to my lasso, and I'm going to take this sort of hot spot and go around it, and I'm going to go to Filter, Gaussian Blur, and that's going to blur that area right there, and I can do it again to do it even more, so it has more effect. And I'm just trying to smooth it out and make that transition not quite as harsh on the face. So that looks pretty good. So it's a little bit darker in here, so I can come in here and kind of make a little selection and Gaussian blur that. And we would just keep doing this through the image until we get it exactly how we want to. So I'm going to zoom out. So I'm going to switch back over and go to the detail in the image. And we're going to leave that detail up high. So one thing that you can see here is now we've smoothed out those tonal transitions, but we haven't gotten rid of the detail area. So you want to make sure the detail is selected, and now we're going to kind of take care of these areas. So you can sort of do the same thing. We can try the patch tool, and the patch tool gets rid of it. So I'm going to Command Z back out of this. You can also use that clone stamp tool. So I'm going to clone and then clone this area. I probably need to increase my opacity a little bit. So I'm taking a texture and I'm replacing it. I can also go back to that healing brush. So where I'm taking a texture and I'm going over it with that healing brush, and it's recreating that texture that we have in the image. Alright, so we can see right over here, notice this was from kind of that little mole or little liver spot on the skin. So it's still showing up when I turn this off. Notice it's gone here, but it's in the texture. So we're going to come in here and just remove that detail of that area. We also have some kind of like lines here in the skin. So I'm going to reduce my brush. It's important that when you're doing retouching, you're constantly just resizing your brush so it's the right size. It makes sense. So notice each time I do this, I'm constantly resampling my texture. So I'm holding down that Alt Option button to resample that texture. So I'll zoom in here a little bit. So we have this kind of flyaway hair that we need to get rid of. So it might still show up when we do this, because sometimes when you're doing this, not only is it color, but it's also texture. But it looks like this is pretty good. So we're just doing a little bit and resampling, doing a little bit and resampling. Now we might have to do shorter strokes here because there's a difference in the texture that we're kind of going through. And I'm going to make this much smaller, and we'll kind of go through and get these little flyaways. So you can see there it did some weird things. So I need to probably clone in this direction instead of the others. But we'll come back into that because we're going to do something very specific on just the hair. So we're coming in here and we're just constantly resampling this area and removing this hair. This can take an absolute long time sometimes. If you have a model or a person with thin hair and it's windy or blowing, this can seriously take a really long time to go in here and just get every single little hair. So we have another one here. So just like we did before, we're going to constantly resample. You can see there's one here that's almost totally out of focus. So we're going to come in here. Now this is an area where you have to watch that it doesn't do anything weird. So it just did something weird there. So I'm going to really kind of zoom in. So you can see it left these weird marks when I made this selection. So what we're going to do here is go this direction. I'm constantly resampling. And if anything happens that doesn't look right, just stop. Use that Command Z. Got something weird there. And go ahead and redo it. So you would just go through this whole image. Now, just like I said before, now we're going through in the high pass layer. There might be sometimes some areas in that low pass that you need to get rid of. You shouldn't in this, but you're just going to slowly come in here and sample and resample. Maybe you have to switch to the clone stamp, maybe you have to do something else, but it's just a lot of time going through to just go ahead and clean up every little hair or every little bit that you don't want. So notice we got this hair and it's kind of going right through here, so I have to kind of come in between and get rid of this. Now, depending on how tight your shot is, kind of depends on how accurate you need to be when you do this. So if it's a looser image, obviously you're never going to see these hairs or anything like that. So you don't need to come in and get these really minute ones. However, in this image, since it's sort of tight, we really need to come in here and and really work on getting a lot of this stuff gone. So this is an area here where I need to work on that transition between no hair and that one little hair. So I can come in here with a brush or the clone stamp and kind of really feather and blend that till we get to where we can't see it. So I don't think we're going to see too much of it here, but we'll just do that. It looks like it's starting to get a little bit smooth from the constant resampling, so I'm going to stop there in that area. So I'm not really spending a whole lot of time doing this because we're trying to just kind of go through this and get it done for this video. So you can watch here. I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to go through and I'm going to go ahead and just resample and sort of clean up the main aspects of this image. I might not get it perfect this time around just because I don't really have time in a video to sit here and retouch this until it looks absolutely beautiful. So what I'm going to do here real quick is, I'm not done, but I'm going to take a break here and I'm going to select both of these layers and I'm going to put these in a group right now. Alright, so I'm just going to zoom in here and I'm going to kind of turn this on and off, and you can see how we've really cleaned up that face. So just got rid of a lot of imperfections. We still have some little marks in here that we're going to come in. I'll come in here and clean up, and I'll probably clean up the eyebrows and stuff and more. But for right now, that's pretty good. So that's just a matter of going in and working in your detail and your color layer. Now this girl's pretty skinny, has good skin tone. This is a well shot image. You will notice as people get older and have more wrinkles, and because the wrinkles cause shadows, the way you kind of get rid of those shadows is by going into this sort of low pass or color layer and do more of that blending, and that will help get rid of, you know, double, triple chins and stuff like that. So give me a second. I'm going to finish retouching everything here, and I will see you for the next step. Alright, so we've created this group here, and we've done some work in the color and the blur, and we've also done some work here in the detail and high. Now I'm not totally done. This area could use some more work, and just a few other areas could use some more work. But really, when we look at this, you know, this is a really good start, and this might be perfect for somebody. This is all they want, is their skin cleaned up and they're happy with that, and you don't need to do any more. The next step, however, if you're doing sort of high-end retouching, is going to be a new layer, and we're going to use that layer to fix bad color or sculpt the face. So I'm going to come down here, and this is really important. This layer has to be between the blur and the detail layer. So I'm going to come down here, create a new layer, and I'll just call this Sculpt for now. Alright, so that's the Sculpt layer. And in this layer, we're going to be using the brush. And what's important when using this is to have a low flow rate. So I'm going to show you the difference between low and opacity if you've never done it. So I'm just going to put my opacity at about 50%. And when I paint down, let me switch colors here, so hit D. I do this, this is 50% of black. So as I paint this, it's only going to put down a maximum of 50% no matter how many times I go over it. So this gray is going to be 50%. So I'll undo that. And we'll move opacity up and take flow all the way down to 1%. So flow works similar but different. So when you're doing flow, it builds up over time. So each time I pass, it increases the density by 1% because I have it at 1%. So it allows me to build up that color over time. So when you are retouching and you're trying to make a highlight here, get rid of this nasty color, you don't want to do it at 100% because it's going to be way too much and you're going to see what's going to happen. So here I'll pick a skin tone here and then we'll paint it in. You can see it really has affected the image a lot. So that's not something that we want to do. Now remember, we're painting and this is only applying to this bottom layer. It's not applying to the detail. We never want to apply the detail because we want to keep these pores and this information in this photo. We're just going to be adjusting this color. So I'm going to take my flow rate down to about 3% and I usually make my opacity about 75%. And what I'm going to be doing is taking colors in this image and painting over those areas. So one of the problems I have is right here we've got sort of a reddish color, maybe from where I was cloning it. So I want to replace that color with a more natural color. So the color that we should have is this color up here. So I'm going to take my Alt Option key and hold that down and select that color. And then I'm going to be using my brush and I'm going to slowly just paint over that, and you can see it's quickly adjusting that color so it matches what is above it. So I will turn this on and off. So you can see how we've replaced that color. Now I've kind of got some over here, didn't do a good job. And I'll come back over and I'll just kind of do that a little bit more accurately. And remember, each time I pass over this, it is replacing that color. Now I can easily make a mask and paint that out and do stuff like that there. So I can come up here. So one of the issues I have on this photo here is her nose is a little dark here. We want a highlight here. And if you notice under here, it's kind of got a blackish color just from a natural shadow. So we want to replace those colors. So what I'm going to do is pick sort of a highlight color over here that I like in the face, and then I'm going to paint down over here, and this is going to sort of replace or slowly adjust that color so it blends into what is in the background. So I'll turn that on and off, and you can see how that affects the face. So we want to put a highlight here on the face. We just paint over it more. Now if I want to add some more shadow, I can get a darker color from that part of the nose, or maybe up here, and then I can come in here and I can paint this into this area. So by creating a shadow here, I'm creating a thinner nose and a highlight there. So another area that we have is kind of right under here. It's starting to get a little reddish, and I just want to tone that shadow down under the face. So I'm going to come over here and pick a color without so much intense red in it, and I'm going to adjust my brush. It's important to keep adjusting your brush sizes when you do this. And we're going to come in here and just sort of paint and blend that area so it blends in better with our face. Now you can I could do one of these sculpt cheek, sculpt nose, sculpt chin. I could keep creating layers if I wanted, and a lot of times when I'm doing high-end stuff, I will do that so I can easily stop it or adjust it or control what I'm doing, and I have a lot of different layers. So if I do something that I don't like, I don't have to delete this whole layer or get rid of this whole layer. I can adjust one little simple part of it. So another thing we can do here is sort of sculpt the face. So I'm going to come in here with my opacity. I'm going to grab this brush. I'm going to grab this highlight. And I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to, looks like we didn't get the right highlight. So we're going to get the highlight. Looks pretty good. All right, so we're coming here. We're just going to brush this darker area out with this highlight color here. And basically we want to kind of continue this line here. Now you can do the same thing here with this kind of cheekbone. So I can pick a darker color or something that I like, and I can come in here and I can follow this motion of where this makeup is at, and I can darken that. And as I darken this, I'm making a stronger cheekbone. So I'll turn this on and off so you can see we're intensifying that cheekbone and sculpting the face. And basically you're just going to go around your whole image. So if I want to darken or lighten this area in here, I'll take a good color here. I can simply just come in here and paint this nose out. So right here I think I'm going to get a brighter color, and this could use a little more highlight. So we're just going to go over that and do a little highlight. So anywhere in the face or anywhere on the skin that we want to adjust or shift color, this is something that we easily can do. So I can take this and I can paint some more highlight into the chin. Something you do a lot is right over the eyes here, we can highlight this little area above the eyebrow to make them stick out. So notice right here we have sort of a strong shadow on the chin. If I want to get rid of that, I can easily just kind of simply pick a color and then basically start to paint that out of that nose. I didn't do a good job. I go back out here so you can see it. So it's a little strong, but we will pick a better color, make a smaller brush, and we're just basically softening that shadow of underneath that nose so it's not as strong. So right here on this lip, if I want to soften this area a little bit on the side of the lip, I can easily just paint a color over that. And so I'll zoom out here and I'm going to toggle this on and off, and you can see how much it really does shift and adjust the face. So this is probably the most time consuming aspect of doing face retouching is sculpting. It helps to know how to put on makeup and what to adjust and how to make a line or a cheek look better or worse. So it takes some time. I'm not going to sit here and go over every single aspect, but this is the basic gist of what you're doing. You're just coming in here and you're adjusting the color of the face. So I'll come back and do a little bit more work. So I can see one right here. So right here under the nose. So notice we have a shadow here. If we wanted to create more of a shadow on this side of the face, I could come and paint it in, and then I could paint more of a highlight in here in this side of the lip here. So if I want to accentuate that for some reason, this is something that I can easily change. So another aspect I see in this photo is kind of right here. We have kind of this strong shadow and not so pleasing color. So I'm going to come below it and pick something without that color in it. And I'm just going to do a couple swipes here. And we're going to hopefully get rid of that color and blend that into the side of the face. So you can see we've kind of gotten rid of that and just made it and simplified it a little bit. So right here we have sort of a non-natural color. Sometimes you don't see these things until you actually do zoom in or zoom out. So we can see we're just kind of blending that into the other area. So I would just keep going in and doing this over and over until I am happy with what I've done, and then I would stop. So the next step with this is we've done all this retouching and adjustments to the skin. Now I don't want any of this to apply to the hair, the background, what the clothes or what they're wearing. So what I'm going to do is, notice since we're in a group, I will call this frequency separation. And then I'm going to put a mask on that. So now there's a mask. So I'm going to invert that mask, which is Command I on a Mac, Control I on a PC. And you can see now we've undone everything that we had. Well, we don't actually want to blur or make adjustments to detail areas of the face. We just want to do it to the areas of the skin and a little bit of this hair where we retouched it. So what we're going to do is take white, which is the opposite color of black, and now we're going to paint that effect into our image. Now I need to get my flow all the way up and my opacity all the way up, and you can see as I go over this it will just disappear. So now we're reapplying what we just did, but we don't want it to apply to certain areas of the eye. Now we did do some work here over the eye, so I might paint a really small line just to make that adjustment, or to apply this over the area that we don't want it to happen. So notice I'm coming in here, and anything that I want to adjust. So we remove this area, notice, so I'm replacing that. So we're just kind of brushing this out. And if we have to go back in and get something within the eye, that's not going to be a big deal. So we're just going to come in here and paint and apply a mask to the whole skin area. So I'm going to make this bigger, and I'm actually going to make it a little bit harder. And we're just going to come in and paint all those adjustments out of the face until we get looking like we had done in the previous steps. So give me a second and we'll go through here. I'll leave it up, I just won't be talking. We'll just kind of go through and okay, so I'm clicking on Alt Option to bring up my mask, and that's showing me different areas, and it's also letting me know like if there's a black area somewhere where I missed it. So right here, that's where that thing was in the eyebrow, and here's the little bit in the eye that I was working on. So I'm gonna click this back over. I think I'll just go over this. So now we can see that effect. We've taken it and then we've applied it. And so what's great is, and I'm going to zoom in for this a little bit, and so now we're only applying this to the skin, but I want you to look at the pores here. So I'm going to go on this detail level, and right now my opacity is at 100. So I can lower that opacity, and notice it's softening the skin. So I have control over how much detail and how much softening I have in my image. So I can come in here and lower this to 73%, and now I can go out and I have still have the pores, but I have a lot of the softening as well. So I'm going to once again select this, turn this on, turn this off, turn this on, turn this off. So we need to come in here and do a little more sculpting and painting and adjustments of color to make this look good. But that's the basics of using frequency separation for the skin. So after this, we're going to go ahead and we're going to tackle the eyes, and we're going to do that on a separate layer, and then we're going to work on the hair and the lips after that. Alright, so we're going to go in here and clean some of this stray hair that we have in this image and try to remove this loop here as well. So what I'm going to do is just on my top layer, I'm going to create a new layer, and we'll call this hair. And there's a couple different ways to remove hair. Since we've got a simple background, I'm just going to use this blank layer. And we're kind of either going to use the brush to paint that color back over the hair to remove it, or maybe use the spot healing brush. You can use clone stamp tool. You know, it's just a time consuming process. There's a couple fancy different ways that people use, but the fact is, eventually you just kind of have to, if you're going to retouch, you just have to go in here and do it. It's just time consuming. Alright, so what we're going to do is we will zoom in here, and I'll show you how this works. So this is pretty simple, because this is a pretty simple background. I can simply just pick the color that's near to where I want to paint over and paint. Notice I'm not at full opacity. A lot of times if you do full opacity, you can kind of see that edge. Also, you want to make sure at a pretty soft brush so it blends in pretty good. And notice we're just simply painting over that. You could also come in here with like the spot healing brush. My brush is a little small. And simply just go ahead and clone or use the content aware tool to remove some of that stuff. but that's going to kind of take a long time for some of those. Eventually we'll come in here and kind of refine this and really clean these edges up with the brush. But notice also we're at normal and we're using content aware, and you want to sample all layers. If you just sample this layer, well, there's nothing in this layer, so it won't work. So make sure you're sampling all layers. So you're going to notice when I'm using this paintbrush here to kind of clean the general areas up that I'm constantly resampling. I'm holding that Alt Option key down, getting my color picker, and I'm just going ahead and cleaning these areas up. And so I need to do that just because the tone or the value is different. So here's where you can see that 76% effect on the hair. It didn't totally cover it up, so I'll go over it a second time or maybe a third time in some cases to kind of remove that. Now we've got that area, and we'll definitely come back in and fix that and clean that up in a second here. So when you get closer to the edges, it's usually helpful to have a soft brush when you're doing this stuff because it won't leave an edge. But when you get closer to areas that you need a tighter tolerance, you really need to lessen the feather on that brush so it's a little bit more exact as to what you're doing. So you can see we've kind of really cleaned that up. And the closer I get and the more exact I'll want to get, the smaller I'll make that brush. And then I will just get a better look or feel from what I'm doing. Alright, that looks pretty good. I'm just going to come up here. So I'm not going to jabber on forever here about this. I'm just going to be using this brush generally right now. So you'll see me, I'll leave this running and I'll just kind of go through and let this screen capture run as I do this. So I'm going to create a mask right here, so I don't like how this looks. And basically what I'm going to do is just paint some black. And that's going to bring back some of that hair that what we had. So I've created a mask and saying, hey, I like what I did, but everything but right there, I want to bring some of that back. I'm going to zoom out and kind of look to see what I've done here. I'm going to lower my flow, and that's just going to bring back some of that hair, but not all. So notice I'm kind of going halfway over and halfway not. That's just going to clean that edge up so it's not too soft and too fake looking. So I don't like what I did there. That's going to problem area, so I'm not going to deal with that. And then we're going to come down here. We'll go over that. That's just bringing back some of those hairs so the edge looks a little bit more realistic. Alright, so this is what this looks like. You can see we kind of have just cleaned up that hair. We can go in here and refine that and fix that. We're going to have to probably go and clean up some of this hair and straighten that as well. Notice we've got some weird bumps here now. So that's pretty normal that you get stuff like that. We will take care of that later, and I can kind of fix that area and kind of smooth it out and make it look better. Alright, so our next step is we're going to go ahead and kind of do a little bit of work on the eyes. And in this layer, we're actually just going to deal with the iris and pupil in this part of the eye, not the white and red part of the eye. So what we're going to do is I'm going to run an action, and it's basically this frequency separation action. So I'm going to go ahead and click it. It's my action. It's just going to run that process over again. Same thing that we did before. So we've got a second frequency separation. But we're actually going to get rid of that layer and that layer for now. All we want is the detail layer for this. And so we can zoom in to the eye. And you can see it's creating more detail or sharpness or kind of a high definition in the eye. So we're just using that detail layer, you can see. So we're going to use this to kind of open this to kind of sharpen up just this colored part of this eye. Now we're not going to use 100% of it, so we're going to be able to lower that down probably to 70%. So the next part of this, what we're going to do is I'm going to actually make a curves adjustment. And there's a couple different ways you could do this with dodge and burn as well, but I'm going to use a curves adjustment. So we're going to come in here, and I'm just opening up my highlights a lot. And then I'm going to hit Command I, so that's inverting my mask so it's black. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit D to get my default colors. I'm going to make my brush really small. I'm going to bring this all back up to 100%, and I'm going to paint in the eye. And we're just going to brighten, we're just going to brighten this area right down in here. So I want to make sure this is a soft brush, and we're going to come in here and just open that up. We might open just this up a little bit, and then we're going to do the same thing over here in this eye. We're going to open that up a little bit. So you can see, I'll turn this on and off. You can see darker, lighter. So we've opened this area up here, just kind of almost like it's a catch light. The next thing we're going to do, and you could remember, you could use dodge or burn. I'm just going to make my shadows a little bit darker, and then I'm going to hit Command I. It's just a process. You could use burn in this as well. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to darken my pupils. And we're going to model this. This is giving it more dimension here in the eye. So this kind of outer dark ring, we're going to go ahead and paint over that. I'm going to lower my opacity a little bit, and we're just going to darken this up a bit. Okay, that looks good. This one doesn't really need it because it's sort of out of focus, but we'll go ahead and do it. And I'm going to zoom out here, and I'm going to turn that layer on and off so you can see what that does. As you can see, we're just slightly darkening that. Really makes your eye kind of pop and stand out. And that's pretty much all I'm going to do. So we've added some a little bit of sharpness and a little bit of detail, and then eventually we're going to have to go in here and I'm going to clean up some of this red. You're not totally going to see it, but it's something we're going to work on, and I will do that in probably another layer. I would need to create a new layer in this and make sure it samples all layers, and then I would come in here and I can start to remove the bigger red veins in the eye. Alright, and I'll come back to this because it's going to take me a little bit. You're not want to sit here and watch me clone out every single little eye thing. So one important aspect of this is, notice when I sharpen this eye, we're eventually going to put a mask up here on the folder, but I'm going to put a mask on the detail, and that's because I don't want this happening anywhere but the colored part of the eye. So I'm going to move this over. So I'm now, notice, black mask, none of this is showing. I'm going to come in here, I'm going to make my brush a little bit harder, and I need a brush. Bring this back up to 100%, and then I'm just going to paint white into just that colored portion of the eye, because that's really the only part that I want to increase that detail and separation in. Alright, so now that is just in the eye. We don't want to sharpen up the white part of the eye. That just wouldn't make any sense. So now I'm going to come back in here and try to clone out a little bit more of this red veining in the eye. Alright, that's pretty good. So we've got this down pretty well. So most of that redness is out. So the next thing I'm going to do is come in here with an adjustment, and I'm going to go into hue saturation. So there's going to be a lot of red in there, so we're going to remove some of that red. And there's also going to be cyan in the whites of the eyes. Nope, so we don't got any cyan, so maybe there's blue. So we just might have some blue in the whites of the eyes. So it's actually not bad here and a little bit bad here. So that's something you want to check for. Sometimes you get a cyan or yellow cast in the whites of the eyes, which I don't. So I'm just going to come in here to red. I'm just going to lower that a little bit, but I'm also going to brighten it. This is going to brighten that area of the eye. Now, we only want this to apply to the white of the eye. So I'm going to hit Command I, which is going to invert that layer to black, and then we're going to come in here and paint or just apply this to that specific area. We're just going to reduce a little bit of the color, and this doesn't need to be perfect for this tutorial, so I'm just kind of quickly coming in here and brushing this stuff out. And then I'm going to come up to this frequency separation just in general and hit a mask for that. I'm going to hit Command I. Nothing is going to be applied now, and I'm just going to go into not the eyelashes or anywhere else. I'm just going to make my brush a little bit harder, and we're going to go ahead and paint white. So everything that we did will apply to that eye, but nowhere else in this image. So we only want that stuff to apply just in this image. And so that's pretty good. We've kind of cleaned those eyes up. You can see the difference. Really made them pop. So we'll zoom out now. So we can make there. And so if we want to reduce that, we can go into the individual layers, or just in general on the whole thing, we can lower the opacity so that's not quite as strong. But for right now, we'll just leave it up at 100% and we can go back in. So that is kind of how you tackle or adjust eyes in Photoshop. So the next thing we're going to work here is on this lips, and specifically this shadow. Now this is unusual to get a shadow like this, but we're going to darken this in just a bit so it blends in more with the lips, and then we'll just do a little bit more. So I've created another frequency separation, and I'm going to call this lips. We're going to do a few things. We're going to go ahead and open this, and we're going to go ahead and turn that detail off. So we don't want the detail on. And we're also going to blur, take the blur, and I'm going to lower the opacity here a little bit. Alright, so what we want to do here is we've got this detail. Let's zoom in so we can really see what we're doing here. So we've got the detail, and we're going to remove that detail. So what we want to do is take this color and change the color a bit. So we want to darken this to make it match this area. This is not the easiest thing in the world to do. So I've got a brush, and actually, let's see, we'll lower this a little bit. Flow of 4, we'll try that. And we will click on this blur layer, and we'll just go ahead and reduce this. And I'm going to try to pick the lightest color I can find, and we'll come in here and just start painting. Now I kind of want to come down, because if I go over it, I'd rather go over and darken this area, since this area should be darker and this area should be a little bit lighter. Looks like we're going to have to raise this up a bit. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of sort of paint this in first. We're just trying to darken it. We just want to slowly do it, because we don't want to come in here with the flow and just do this too dark and it will look horrible. So we want to make sure that we're slowly building this up. So we're just slowly building this up. And if we go out a little bit, that's okay. We can create a mask here in the end to sort of fix or adjust that. So once again, I'm just going over it slowly to try to build that color up. We're going to put the detail pretty much back over top of this, so we're going to have some of that detail, but right now it's a little bit flat. Went a little bit too far. Just pick a different color, a little bit darker color here. So we want to pick different colors, because obviously something is not always just one color. So here we'll kind of make a little variation in that lip. back over here, get this color. We can come in the end and basically change. We're going to have to saturate this because the way it kind of works, it's adding a little bit too much gray to it, and we're not going to be able to use that. You're going to see like this is grayed out, so we're going to have to come in here and change this color a little bit. And how we're going to do that is we're actually going to add an adjustment layer to this blur layer. Or if I was really smart, I would have done this with this retouch layer and did this one in below, which would have made sense. But we're going to be good here, so that's pretty good. So now if we come back and bring that detail in, we can see we still got the detail, but it's a little flat and the color's a little bit desaturated. So let's go ahead and try to make an adjustment layer above this. So we're going to do a hue saturation adjustment layer. And that's going to allow me to do a couple things. It's going to allow me to increase that saturation a bit. And I'm going to make a mask on it eventually, so I try to get it somewhat similar in that area. And then we're going to try to adjust that so it was a little bit gray. So let's go into reds. Make this just a hair pinker. And we're going to switch back over to the layer so we can see that layer. So we're going to make a mask now. I'm going to invert this. And then I'm going to come in here with the color white. I'm just going to say, hey, I only want to apply this color to this area. And you can see that's already looking way better. So I will drop back over to this hue saturation, and we're going to just go ahead and kind of shift this till we get that to match a little bit. Turn this back on, and we'll zoom out. And you can see as we've zoomed out, it's really starting to blend. You're not going to notice. You're never going to look at the lips that close. So what we're going to do now is just go ahead and go into this blur layer here, and I'm going to just lighten this area up a bit. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to make another adjustment layer. And we're just going to brighten that area up. You could use a couple like dodging and burning tools and stuff, but I pretty much only use adjustment layers for this type of stuff. So I'm going to Command I to invert that so it's black, and then it's just going to allow me to come in here and paint white and adjust that how I want. I want to adjust that brush. We can turn this on and off, and you can see it's just making a minor adjustment. Now we can always come in here and really adjust this so you can see, say, hey, that's where we're doing it. You'll notice I messed up. We'll clone that out. I'm just going to brighten this up here. I'm going to come over and get that spot and hit an X so we get black, and we're just going to paint that out. X. So it doesn't affect that one area. So we've just sort of lightened that area. Hit D. Just look. That's going to be too much, so I'm going to lower this flow. We'll just lighten that area up a little bit. Till we get the lips how we want them to look. So I'm going to close this down. I'll turn this off, turn it on, turn it off, turn it on. So I think I brightened this area just a little bit too much, which is great. It's no big deal. I can easily come in here to this curves level, and we're just going to lower the opacity down to about 75%. And we'll close that up, and I'll zoom back out, and so you can see that was before and that was after. Now it's a little not round here, and it's a little messed up here. We're gonna fix that kind of odd shape here in the end. So I'm gonna go in, and eventually in the end I'm gonna go into the Liquify tool, and I'm gonna just reshape some stuff. So this area of the lips right here, where it's just kind of an odd shape. The color's a little bit off too. I might be able to go in here and change this. So the last thing that we need to do with lips is actually create a mask. So I'm going to create a mask, and I'm going to invert this mask, because right now we've got that frequency separation running, and we don't actually want to run it, because you can see it was changing the skin tone and everything and how it works. So we don't want to do that. We just want to make sure this affects only the lips. So I'm going to take white with 100% on both of these, and then just very carefully come in here and paint this in. So I'll make this a little bit bigger. I'm going to reduce the feather on this so it's a little bit more accurate, and we're getting 100% out towards those edges. And I'm alright with the color. It looks like we could use a little bit more pink over here. So we can come in here to the blur layer. And this is something where I could easily take this brush, grab this color. If I wanted to add a little bit of pink, I guess it would help to reduce the flow. And we can add a little bit more color back in there to sort of even this area out. Darken that area up just a little bit. And that looks a whole lot better. So there to there. So we've kind of evened these lips out. So we're going to go ahead and stop there for the lips, and we'll come back and we'll move on to the next section. Alright, so we are now going to go create a new layer. So I'm going to hit new layer again, and I'm going to hit Command Option Shift E, which is to make a stamp visible layer. That would be Control Option Shift E on a PC. And we're going to use this for the Liquify tool. Unfortunately, the Liquify tool needs a layer and a top layer. So it's going to be one of the last things that I do as far as adjusting or toning an image. So we can go up in here to Filter and then drop down to Liquify. Alright, so there are some preloaded face aware Liquify tools. So you will select, it selects the face, and then as you move your eye, you can see it's already selected around those areas, and it will allow you to adjust and manipulate the eye. So let's say that I wanted to zoom in and I wanted to make this eye just a little bit bigger. I can come in here and make that eye just a little bit bigger. And I can come in here to the nose, so I can change the nose width. And all that stuff's pre-selected usually within Face Aware Liquify. And unfortunately, what I want to do here is adjust some very specific areas. So we're going to be using the forward warp tool, and so that allows you to kind of push in. Now the trick with the forward warp tool is the bigger the brush, the smoother the adjustment. So you can see before, when I had a small brush, it really made a huge effect on that image. There's also something called the freeze tool. So I'm going to freeze this eye, so any place you paint over, and then if you go to the forward warp tool, it's going to warp that area, but it's not going to adjust that eye. Right? It's going to leave the eye part alone. So we will just Command Z back out of that. And so what I want to do is come in here and sort of reshape this lip a little bit. So I'm going to try to do this without using a freeze mask. So I'm just going to come in here a little bit, and I just want to change this lip shape just a hair. Not doing much to it. I just want a little bit smoother transition to it. Pretty good. You'll hardly see any movement. We're really zoomed in, so it's magnifying what I'm doing. So we're good. So the next thing we're going to do, we got some little bumps in the hair and stuff here that I just want to even out. So I'm going to make a really large brush like I said before, and we're just going to go ahead and push some of these areas in a little bit so it's kind of smooths out this hair. We're we're going to come drop down a little bit. We'll get the top part of the hair there, and then right here I'm going to have to make this a little bit smaller, otherwise it won't be accurate enough. And that doesn't look good, so I'm just going to drop this down. We'll leave that where it is. Alright, we smooth these areas out. So I'm going to adjust this little shoulder here to make it a little bit less defined. That looks good. And then right here on the cheek, we'll give her a little bit harder edge cheek here. Alright, that looks good. So I'm good with that. So there's actually a lot you can do in this as far as reshaping and adjusting faces, but I'm not going to go crazy today and doing this. We're just going to be making some simple adjustments. So that is how we do Liquify. So I've changed this layer to Liquify, and we've made some small adjustments as far as Liquify goes and kind of reshaped and redone the face. Not a whole lot, but definitely looks a lot better. So the last thing that we're going to do here is eyelashes. And you can see she has eyelashes. They're not the most full eyelashes. There's basically two ways you can do this. You can sort of clone and paste eyelashes and then transform them. You can draw them in, or in this case, I'm going to use fake eyelashes. So the eyelash is actually a brush. And so I will click on this button here, and I'm going to just slide this over real quick so you can see. So I actually have a whole bunch of different types of fake eyelashes here, and these are just brushes. So I'm going to take this off. I already have one set and ready to go, I think. And so what we're going to do is, first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this and make a new layer. So I'm going to make a new layer. So this is something that I can turn on and off, and we will call this eyelash. And I'm going to take my color and I'm going to zoom in because I really want to get the color of her eyelash. So I'm going to go ahead and hold down Alt Option, and we're going to take that color, and for some reason it didn't pick it up. There we go. I'll hit OK out of the box, and so there's that eyelash color. So we want our eyelashes to be the same color on this side, so we're going to go ahead and use that. So I'm going to come up here, and I still have this eyelash reloaded. Now when you're doing this, you need to kind of get an eyelash that matches the type of eyes you have and the shape. Now we're going to be able to manipulate it a little bit, but I'm going to get this as close to where I can, and I'm going to go ahead and make my flow and opacity 100. And I'm going to set this up where I want it and just click once. So there's my eyelash. So what I'm going to do now is get rid of that. I'm going to really zoom in because we need to manipulate this and set this eye exactly where we want it. So this eye needs to come down. You can see it dips a little bit down too much here. So I'm going to hit transform. And our transform box is kind of big. So I'm going to hit Alt, I'm going to hit Control and click in the center, and I'm going to go to Distort. And basically what I want to do is move that area up a little bit. So you can see here I'm tilting this up so this will come down. We just want to distort or change this eyelash until it starts to conform a little bit more with that area of the face. That looks pretty good. I'm going to hit return, which is going to apply that, and there's my eyelash sort of in the area that I want. I'm going to get rid of part of this eyelash. So notice when I made this, it's a little bit flatter and the color's not exact. Okay, so I made the wrong type of adjustment layer, so I want a curves adjustment layer, and I'm just going to increase the contrast of that. I'm going to go back to the layers. I only want this applied to this layer, so I am going to hold Alt Option and get that little symbol, and we're going to turn this into a clipping path. So it's saying this curve is only going to apply to this. So I can come back in and change this contrast if I want. I'm just going to bump it up so it starts to blend better with that eye. Now, one of the issues I have with this eyelash here is it's in a couple areas where I don't want it to be. So I'm going to take a brush, and remember we're going to have to go back to a normal brush, and I'm going to make sure the color black is there because black is going to hide, and I'm going to get rid of this part, make this a harder edge so I can clean this up. So our eyelashes are not quite as long as the ones on this image, so I'm going to reduce some of those so they're closer to what we see in the image. So I'm trying to also exaggerate those points a little bit as well. So it looks like we messed this area up a little. So that looks pretty good. Looks like we've got a little bit of black here that we want to get rid of. So that's looking pretty good. So I can turn this on and off. Now it's a little too intense, so I can reduce the opacity so it starts to blend in with the other eye a little bit. And then I will zoom back out, and you can see that is with the new eyelash, and that is without an eyelash. So we're just making it a kind of a fuller eyelash in this case. And then we'll go ahead and do the same thing. You can do the same with the bottom eyes. So I've created a new layer, and I've called this one lower eyelash. And it's helpful to make all these separate layers, anything you can a separate layer, because if you want to get rid of it or change it layer, it's easy. You just kind of turn one layer off. So we're going to come up here to this eye, and I'm going to go ahead and just select that. Now we're going to go ahead and hit Command T, and we are going to control click inside, and I'm going to hit warp on this one because it's going to allow me to really adjust how this looks, and I need to zoom in so I can see what I'm doing. And so I'm just basically taking these points and warping this eyelash so it conforms more with the eye that we have. That looks pretty good. I'm going to hit return. So this is a little bit too big, so I'm going to go back to Command T, and I'm going to just reduce this down so it's a little bit smaller, and then I'm going to control click again. I'm going to hit warp. I'm going to even warp this some more. Just basically trying to adjust this so it fits our eye better. And that looks pretty good. So I'm going to put a mask on this. I'm going to get rid of anything that's right over here that I actually don't want, just like I did with the other one. So we're going to need a brush. I'm going to reduce that brush, and we'll just make sure nothing over here that I want. Then I'm going to take that and reduce that opacity. So we'll turn that on and off. So I'm actually going to go in here with just a normal brush, and I'm going to lower my flow. I'm actually going to take that color and just kind of darken in this eye so it blends a little bit. This mascara went on, it wasn't perfect, so we're just going to go ahead, add a little bit more of that color so it looks better, and then we will zoom back out, and we can see this eye is just a little bit bigger. Now this isn't something that you have to do. This is just how I put eyelashes or bigger eyelashes to make eyes a little bit more dramatic on people. So the last thing that we're going to do here on this image is tone it. So now that I've made all my adjustments on this top layer here, I've added some eyelashes on the right eye. So one of the tricks is, because this eye is a little bit out of focus, I actually blurred this image about by 2 pixels. So the eyebrow was, or the eyelash was not too sharp. So we're going to go ahead here and make an adjustment layer, and we're just going to slightly brighten this image up. I'm also going to make a slight adjustment and reduce a little bit of that red. And then I'm going to make a hue saturation adjustment layer, and I'm going to go into reds, and I'm going to make the reds a little bit more yellow. And I'm only going to do it by like 1 or 2 pixels. Now this is sort of personal preference as to how or what you want this to look like, but we've got a little red here and the face is a little red, so I'm just adding some red and I'm shifting the color to make it how I want it. The problem is when I'm doing this, about 2 is good for the face but maybe not for the hair, so I can easily make another hue saturation adjustment. I can go back into red, I can make the red another 1 or 2 units. I'm going to hit Command I, so I'll come over to layer so you can see what I'm doing. It's black here. I've switched that. We're going to take this brush and get a real circle here, and I will just go ahead and make sure I have white as my foreground color, and we will paint that into this hair, and that will shift that color and add that 2 extra units to make this a little bit more warm and towards the yellow. And that looks pretty good. That's really all I'm going to do on this image here. I could blow out this background if I wanted, but I think we're going to go ahead and leave it the way it is. So hopefully these videos have been helpful, and thanks for watching.